All right, welcome everyone to another AVAIL webinar, Customer Success webinar series. This month, we've pulled together some kind of exciting guests and panelists for this topic. You've seen the announcement and some of the information. This is about Beyond Revit. So we're talking about AVAIL, we're talking about project information, and how that can all fit inside AVAIL beyond just some of the Revit families and details that you might be most accustomed with. So before we get started, I'll introduce myself. My name is Clay Watson. If you haven't seen me with these webinars at all, I'm the Director of Customer Success. My counterpart is Rob Snyder. You might be speaking with him through our support channels and different strategy calls and things like that. But we lead our customer success team. So before we get started, I'll give you the agenda here. I'm going to go over just kind of a general overview of AVAIL, right? We've got some new folks, new AVAIL people in this webinar, so I want to make sure we kind of cover the basis. There's a couple of core principles that I like to repeat as much as I can, and I think they're going to be very relevant to what we're talking about today. Again, we're talking about content beyond Revit, beyond RFAs and RVTs, different file types, and wherever they reside, right, on your network, your folder structure, and so forth. So I'm going to talk about those core principles, and then I'm going to hand it off to three different panelists, actually four different panelists. The first of which are AVAIL champions at JLG Architects. They're going to be talking about some of their BIM reference library content. They've got some sustainability resources in AVAIL as well. And then I'll be handing it over to Peter Rebecki over at SCB. And he's got some really great content around project reference documents and material libraries. So again, it's all these things that kind of live around your project and are important, and they can also be live in AVAIL as well. And then to finish things off, I've got Rebecca Yu over at Mead Hunt. And they've been a kind of early adopter. You may have seen some of the communication. We've been pushing forward to release a new add-in for AutoCAD and Civil 3D, which kind of broadens our support over block libraries and DWG files. And Mead Hunt has been very influential in some of that development and some of that feedback. And so I'm going to pass that over to Rebecca. She's going to talk about that experience, right? Kind of learning AVAIL, kind of getting into this, using the add-in, supporting these type of files from AutoCAD, and then she's also got some bonus content around Bluebeam that she's been wanting to share as well. They've been testing that out in AVAIL and organizing it in our platform, which is great. So it'll be kind of a breadth of different types of content. That was the kind of the idea of this webinar is where we kind of hone in on the Revit workflows because they are so important, but AVAIL is very much bigger than that. If we can support a lot more than that, and there's some really core advantages that you can take from the platform if you're utilizing all these different features and things. So without further ado, let's talk about the AVAIL, kind of the two main core principles of AVAIL. Again, I go through this on all of our onboarding. I think Will Rouse goes through it in their sales conversations, and it's something we bring up during these webinars as well, just to make it very clear. The first thing is that AVAIL is file type agnostic. And so what that means is that we support all different file types. Any and all of them can be supported through AVAIL. So if you're talking about Revit content or non-Revit content, like we're going to be talking about today, we support it all. So we've got capabilities to display URLs, right? You can actually open a web page in AVAIL and scroll through it and browse it. We've got our own PDF viewer in AVAIL that you can open up a PDF and scroll through it and search. And now most recently we're supporting these kind of DWG files and block libraries and things like that, which are really great. So file type agnostic, we support all of these different file types. They can live inside of AVAIL. They can be centralized and accessible by really anyone with access to the platform. The second core principle that I like to cover is that we are file location agnostic. So these files can live wherever you need them to live, whether it's on a cloud network or a local network folder structure. We support all of that, and very especially Ignite. We've got a new integration with Ignite coming down the road, which is very exciting to launch here very soon. But all of these files, they can live where they live. All of those permissions and security around the folder structure can stay intact, but we can support that through our platform. And again, make it centralized. It can be, assets, project documentation assets, photography, all these things are going to live in different folders all over the network with different access and things like that. But Avail can give you that platform to centralize all that information, give you that nice search capability across all of these different resources, and give kind of a one source of truth for all this different content and the content types around it. So those are the kind of the big two principles: file location agnostic and file type agnostic. And so again, circling back, the topic of this webinar is beyond Revit. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to our champions at JLG Architects, Morgan Blum and Elliot Klinger. Morgan is a BIM manager at JLG, and Elliot is our design technology specialist. And so I'm going to turn it over to them. They're fairly new to Avail. They've been with, I think we're going up in our 1 year anniversary. So it's going to be great to kind of get their perspective on how that's been, what strategies they put in place to support this non-Revit content in Avail. Elliot and Morgan, I'll turn it over to you.
Awesome. Thank you, Clay, for the introduction. I'm really happy to be here. I'm speaking for Morgan as well. I'm sure he's happy to be here as well. We have a duplicate slide, it looks like, but you are right. My name is Elliot Klinger, a design technology specialist at JLG Architects based out of Fargo, North Dakota. And I'm here with Morgan Bloom, our BIM manager today. We both joined JLG at the same time about 3 years ago. And at that time when we joined, there really was no reliable content management system for our project teams. That was one of the first priorities that we took on. So we hit the ground running and started evaluating options almost immediately, eventually choosing Avail, obviously. We're here on the call. But before we get to that part, I really do want to give a high-level overview of what JLG is, just so you can get a better understanding of the context that Morgan and I are working within. So Morgan, if you want to go to the next slide. JLG is at its basic a 200-person firm with 120 active Revit users that are spread out across at least 9 offices. And we work on a variety of different project types and market sectors, from multifamily to healthcare to higher education to ice hockey arenas, sports and civic spaces as well. So we have a wide breadth of projects that we work on, and that requires a lot of content that needs to be managed. So like I was saying, Morgan and I were essentially working with nothing when we got to JLG. So we took the opportunity to explore several different options, and we tried some things out, some traditional methods such as network folder structure, SharePoint sites, but ultimately nothing really stuck. And nothing was really flexible or as flexible as we needed it to be for a firm as diverse as ours. And so that's where Avail comes in. And I'm actually just going to hand it over to Morgan at this point, so he can introduce some of the reasons why we chose Avail at JLG and talk about some of the content that we manage beyond just those Revit families, told from his perspective as a BIM manager. And then I'll be back on the second half of our segment to talk about the content that I manage as a design technology specialist.
Thank you, Elliot. Yeah, I think following along here with this theme of today, as Clay talked about and Elliot, yeah, when we first started, it was, we went through a lot of learning curve here. So we had network folder structures, made things hard to find, chaotic, Revit container files, again, cumbersome, inefficient. We were using unified content catalog for a bit, but, they were really BIM focused, content focused, and the Autodesk acquisition was a little troublesome. And so that's when we took the opportunity to reevaluate what we really wanted out of a content management system. And that's where we came across Avail and realized, that it didn't need to be so BIM focused. Things we liked about AVAIL, why we picked it. It's flexibility. Your data can live either in the cloud or on your own premise, so you can control it. A lot of organizational freedom, I would say, from channels down to key cards, and then down to the actual content itself, if that's how you wish to organize it, with keywords, tagging. So the search capabilities are really nice. And as Clay had mentioned, it is file agnostic, and that was one thing that we struggled with other management systems, and really wanted this to be more office-wide, not just for our either Revit users or BIM users. And then they don't prioritize one particular file type over the other. Whether it's a PDF, a URL, video, text file, or anything like that. When you search, it's just all right there for you when you're looking for it. And I'm just going to quickly toggle over to AVAIL for a second, just to show kind of live. Here we have our start page with our basic channels, anywhere from our different studios to a variety of different content that's not all BIM related. And then within one of them, we have then our key cards to kind of help break stuff down even further. And then within there, you'll find, a variety of stuff, and it can be, what's nice is, yes, the built-in preview for whether URL or other types of media, such as if I go back to like our BIM documents here, we have Excel files that are used in our Revit models, things like that, or our office standards. It's a PDF. So again, you can either browse it right within AVAIL or move on. And another handy feature that we really like is a little bit BIM focused, but we've used it for a lot of other things, is the related content. So like if we start up a project, here I have 4 files that are like, these should all be part of your project right away when you start a project. So so just that flexibility of, within AVAIL, whatever content it is. Next, and then making AVAIL kind of, if you will, our single source of truth within our office. Think of it as a pseudo company intranet, but the sources can be, again, internal or external. Web pages for IBC or other things like that. And then within the preview capability that you have within the app, or you can double click on it and open it up in a browser or whatever associated. And then that related content, as I showed, tying, things together. So when you find one piece, you can then, link it to another piece. And these all lead to, again, BIM or CAD adjacent resources, just regular standard operating procedures, standards, video tutorials that we do, monthly and stuff like that can be put in here as well, and becoming that single source of truth. With that, I will turn it back over to Elliot to expand even further on JLG's use of AVAIL.
Yes. All right. Sorry. All right, I'll work around the share bar. But there are a couple other case studies that I want to talk about on how we use AVAIL, and really it all comes down to that file agnosticism, if that's a term there. But the file agnostic capabilities of AVAIL, meaning that we can start to really surface a lot of project content to our project teams because they're already working in AVAIL, using it as a content manager for Revit. So why not include other resources that they'll need regularly right alongside that Revit content? So I'm going to focus on these two, JLG resources and JLG sustainability, as a couple case studies here. So the JLG resources was actually the first channel group that we created as alternative content other than the Revit families. And this was intended to be a place where a project team could come at any point during the project and get information such as image copyright and image rendering disclaimer, information that they could add to their visualization activities. They could access our JLG wiki pages and support articles directly from AVAIL, find things like office templates and project board templates for InDesign work directly within the tool because they're already working in AVAIL and Revit. So why not surface that information and make it easier for them to find? Because before it was on various different locations and nobody really knew where to find it. And they would pull information down from past project folders, which would ultimately be outdated and require rework and excess resources to be used when it didn't need to be. So to solve that, we created these JLG resource channels here. And I want to highlight just this brand standards here because it's probably the most relatable. But here inside of AVAIL, we have a channel group that contains all of JLG's brand standards. And we can find things related to our color information or our fonts. So if, for instance, somebody didn't have access to our JLG fonts, they'd be able to access that information directly in AVAIL. We've created custom thumbnails for all of these non-BIM content use cases because it allows the user to immediately see, okay, this is a PDF. I know exactly what I'm going to be getting. I can either view it directly in AVAIL or I can open it up in Bluebeam or somewhere else. Here we could see a preview of what that font would look like before, dragging it into our Windows fonts folder and installing that on our computer directly from AVAIL. So very, very easy. Also, we have, of course, logos with, again, a vector-based logo versus a raster-based, as well as those guides that our marketing team publishes and works so hard on, all available directly there in AVAIL. And for the last case study, I'm going to be talking about our JLG Sustainability group and talking a little bit about the story behind how this channel even came to be. So the sustainability group is suffering from a lot of frustration from project teams, again, going to those project folders, grabbing outdated reference materials and using them to track their sustainability metrics on their projects. Now, the issue with that is that those Excel spreadsheets in this instance are tied to a bunch of automation and data collection mechanisms in the background. And so if you're using outdated Excel documents, those automations start to break or fall apart and lose value. So within the matter of a week, maybe a week and a half, I worked with the sustainability group to collect and compile all of the important public-facing resources that they like to have available for all of our project teams, and we made this channel for them. And specifically, I was referring to earlier the FDE10 process, which is our sustainability metric collection workflow. And now we're able to either do a global search through AVAIL, search for FDE10, and easily bring that stuff up, or we can navigate through the key cards and menus to get to it. But we can be certain that this content is always up to date, and this is the content that we want to surface for our users. So that really brings me to the end of my use cases. We really love the file agnosticism of AVAIL. It's been fantastic, and it really does meet the flexibility needs that a firm like JLG really needs at the size and scale that we are. And so with that and with what Morgan showed us, I think it's very clear that AVAIL could be much more than just a Revit content management system. It could really be a knowledge hub for your company if that's what you want out of it. But I'm probably over time, so I'm going to go ahead and hand that over to Peter to continue.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you, Elliot and Morgan. Yeah, Peter Rebecki from SCB. You've got a lot of great resources around your project documentation and material library. So yeah, we can kick it over to you and have you present. And there will be the last portion of the webinar will be reserved for questions. So if you want to post a question, you can do so in the webinar kind of question Q&A dialogue, and then we'll circle back and cover those at the end.
All right. Hi. Hello, everybody. My name is Peter Rebecki. I am the Director of Design Technology at SCB. We're about a little over 200 professionals here nationwide, Chicago, Boston, San Francisco, Seattle, and LA. We've kind of come across AVAIL in our history and how we kind of approach this is that previously we were using Open Asset, I would say early 2010s or so forth for our marketing department. And we really were kind of looking for a 3D visualization as well as 3D asset support for something that would work with Open Asset. Ideally, we were hoping to get Revit families and details into Open Asset. And that didn't seem to be on their roadmap. So we were starting to look for other options at the time. Around 2019, my colleague Frank Balnius, who is the director, actually he's the BIM manager for the firm, my BIM manager, we were at AU and he came across AVAIL, got introduced to Randall, and then since then we've been utilizing AVAIL. So we've adopted it in 2019. And we started off with Revit Family. So Frank went ahead and made an entire Revit Family section on through AVAIL, which is available to the entire staff to utilize in their production. He followed that up with some detailed production as well. So producing details, getting those up inside of Revit for availability. And then we kind of looked, what else can we do with AVAIL? Because we wanted to look at something outside of, just the production and the 3D content that could be utilized inside of Revit. So we started exploring different kind of entourage. So 2D entourage for photography that might be brought into like visualization renderings and so forth. And then we also have three-dimensional geometry like entourage from 3ds Max, brought that into visualization software, and then additional textures. So these were all additional libraries that we built inside of AVAIL, readily available for the staff to use in their production needs. And then we kind of kept going because, of course, we didn't want to stop. And this is all kind of more ideas would come down the line. We started looking at the marketing photography. So we had a curated area for our marketing photography that can be pulled into the system. We actually curate that on the network, which is really kind of nice because all this data resides locally on our servers. And then we can control that through folder structures, which actually help with the tagging, which makes it much easier and actually more time efficient. So we don't have to spend a lot of time manually tagging things. We followed that up with additional resource areas. So now we started putting key plans, key ideal unit layouts, visualization renderings, any kind of different kind of unit plan examples. So we started making an entire collection of project reference as well. So that's kind of where it brought us up to 2025 in these different categories, these different areas on AVAIL we've been using, since 2019. Then we decided, okay, what else can we do? So continuing growth into AVAIL, we started looking into project brochures. So we worked with marketing, kind of curate their entire brochure library, make that readily available so that that can be pulled as a resource that they can take a look at. This would be like principals or so forth, working on their, say, pitches and ideas. They can utilize some existing material here. We went over to PBR material libraries. So this utilizes higher quality materials. This is an entire library based around, just multi-layered materials. Following that with an FBX model library. So moving away from 3ds Max, more towards, say, Twinmotion and utilizing FBX files in Revit and Rhino, as well as embedded materials. So building an entire material library or a model library around FBX files. After that, we kind of look back and say, what are the lessons that we've learned over the years of using AVAIL? So this is my take on what I can offer to you if you're considering looking down the road of AVAIL and you want to use it for non-Revit product-related resources, in this case, what I've been showing you. What takeaways could you go with that would make your life a little easier? What have I learned, basically? So leverage Stream. Stream is a part of AVAIL that kind of monitors what you do in AVAIL. Now, what I mean by that is I would actually maintain a kind of like a draft or a demo folder structure that has all my content in it. And when I have that content ready to go, I utilize a software like, say, Beyond Compare to synchronize that over to a production area. That production area in the network is accessible to all. But the nice thing about that is the AVAIL Stream system is actually monitoring that folder. So as soon as it sees items go into those folders, it's noticing it. And then once it reconciles, it then publishes it automatically. There's no extra, individual grabbing and dropping and one-on-one kind of updating things. And that's where utilizing folder structures is really helpful. If you have a really nice detailed folder structure, you can let the system automatically tag all of your assets based off of the folders they reside in. So the deeper that folder structure is, the more tags will be associated with that asset, which makes it much easier. And it makes the whole point of me, like majority of all the work that I do, I don't even spend any time manually tagging anything. I want to have the folders and the stream do all the work. I rather just put the asset where it needs to go, synchronize it, call it a day. Let the system do the work, and it saves me from having to go and pick each individual file and then manually adjust it. The other thing we came across was the amount of content we kind of were exposed to. The 3ds Max library, before we decided to move to FBX, we were hitting close to 10,000 assets. We have over 25,000 clip art, or basically photography images that are utilized in visualization renderings. So when you start working with a lot of data at that high volume, it's really difficult to just have the main screen come up to you and then scroll through it. It takes a while to load a lot of those thumbnails, especially at that large quantity set. So leverage key card navigation. That'll actually help kind of focus you into the direction your user wants to go. And I'll show you what that key card navigation looks like in the material section next. But that will actually help you kind of get your users to see the content without them waiting for any kind of refresh or load time, especially with large volumes of libraries. And then asset location, that's going to be really helpful. How do you deal with the asset? What do you do with the asset when you want to utilize it? And there's a reason why I kind of call that out, and I'll kind of explain that at the very end of the slide here, what that looks like and why asset location is actually pretty important to be aware of. So in a case like this, we're looking at the PBR material library. This is a physically based rendered materials. And what you're looking at here, instead of seeing all, several thousand materials all at once, you're actually seeing the key cards. The user can come through, they can get a general idea. They're looking for, say, some brick or some stone. They can just go ahead and then move in that direction to kind of learn more about that material and what's available to be offered. Once they go and find the location of what they're looking for, in this case, we're looking at some marble stones, and they can find the material and they can see it. They can use the preview over here in the corner to kind of get a better view of it. They can also double click on it, open the file up, and so forth. Now, ideally, your thought would be to go ahead and utilize this right in your production. And that's where you might want to make the adjustment of how do you actually manage your assets and what's the best practice to do that. And what we advocate is that rather than linking directly to the AVAIL library itself with the asset to your project, what you want to do is you want to bring it over to your network folder. So all of our folder structures for all of our projects have specific folder locations for textures and materials for visualization in this case. And you would basically copy the material over, whether it's a substance material or texture mapped and so forth, like JPEGs or PNGs. You would copy those to your project folder. And then once you have a copy to your project folder, you would then bring those into your desired software, whether it's Twinmotion, Enscape, Affinity, or so forth. So with that being the case, you can utilize it from the application from your folder structure to the application. The reason why that's important is because when that project is archived, all those resources and assets go along with the archive. It's not linked to the network location, meaning that if the network itself, the library could evolve over time. A good example is we're sunsetting our 3ds Max library, but in favor for an FBX library. So by linking directly to a Max library, which is being sunset, a lot of those links may get broken over time. So that's why it's really helpful to kind of make sure you capture the asset, store it with your project location, bundle it, so it gets archived at the appropriate time when the job is wrapped up. So those are a couple of my key takeaways in terms of lessons learned that I've come across that I'd like to share with you. Definitely the stream, auto tag and folder structures, it's very helpful. Card navigation really helps you streamline, get your user into the area you want them to be focusing on. And then asset location is how do you bundle or take something with you so you have longevity of that asset with that project, once the library itself could evolve over time. And that is a really quick rundown of how we're using AVAIL for non-Revit related content at SCB.
Fantastic. Thank you, Peter. Yeah, that's some really good insight, great perspective, good takeaways as well, which is always super valuable to just not understand what can be done, but how it gets done, and some of the strategy that goes into it. All right, cool. So we'll move on to our final panelists, and then again, we're going to open it up for questions there at the end of the webinar. So I'll turn it over to Rebecca Yu at Mead Hunt, and she'll be kind of sharing some of the early experience with AutoCAD and Civil 3D. And then as well as kind of talking about some Bluebeam strategies they've started to test out in AVAIL as well. Rebecca, I'll turn over to you.
Awesome. Just trying to get my screen sharing set up there. So as mentioned, my name is Rebecca Yu. I'm one of the CAD managers here at Mead Hunt. We are a national multidisciplinary AEC firm. We've got about 50 different offices and about almost 1,500 employees. So over the years, we've been using Revit extensively for a great deal of things. But only recently have we been able to sort of expand it to my side of the house where I'm dealing with Civil 3D. and drawing types of files. So we're still sort of figuring out exactly how it is that we want to incorporate all of it. And we want to have our users have the best sort of experience possible. So we're definitely still sort of testing everything out and making sure that we have everything sort of set up before we're pushing it out to all of our users to take advantage of it. Because most people on the civil side have not really seen this before, and we want them to have sort of the best possible experience once they get there. But now that things are sort of file agnostic and we're able to tie into AutoCAD/Civil 3D directly, we're going through and starting to add in all of our details and blocks in here. So initially, when we first started doing that, we were going through and we just grabbed some details that were available from one of our clients. And we just drop them in, the normal sort of process that you would go through and do that. And, we tag sort of as things were brought in, but we weren't terribly happy with sort of the results, right? We were getting sort of this preview that we were like, that's okay, but it doesn't tell us a great deal about that particular detail that's there and whether or not we really, if that's that specific one that we need versus, some of the other ones that might be there. Yes, you can search and you can look at the tags, but, we're visual creatures. It's nice to be able to have that preview there with it. So once the harvest tool was introduced, we were able to start bringing in details that way. And now all of a sudden we're able to bring in something where it's like, yes, I can see that and immediately know that is exactly what I want to be able to bring into our drawings. So far we've got quite a few, 66 so far in here for just aviation details. So we can go through, we can sort, we can find everything that we need directly within that and tie it within the software. So very, very happy with how that is working so far. If I pull up within Civil 3D itself, right, I can go in, I can see the channels. And so my 4 different channels that I have currently for Civil 3D, I can see within here what those are, and I can go to them individually. So if I want to be able to find one of those and be able to bring it in immediately, I can do that. And of course I can harvest if I need to bring additional ones out. The other really nice thing that's in here now are the catalogs, being able to switch over pipe catalogs. Those of you who use Civil 3D are probably familiar with the fact that Civil 3D pipe catalogs are incredibly important if you're trying to be able to use the pipes tool, but they don't necessarily like to stay even once you have set what that pipe catalog is. And it's sort of buried, the process of being able to come up here to pipe network. Going to create design and setting this pipe network, and then you have to go and path, and it takes forever to get to the individual path that you would like to, probably within your own network, right, to be able to get to that. So being able to set these up as being in here, and then just being able to simply click on this to be able to load it to swap it over, to what that new one needs to be. Super, super handy. We're really liking that piece of this. So thus far, we're really enjoying everything that we can bring in using for details. But like I said, we're still testing more than in the actual use of it at this moment in time. We have recently added in blocks as well, which was also a very interesting process because we were initially just details. Let's just figure out how to be able to finally get our details somewhere where everyone would be able to find what they need to look for. Because we're dealing with so many different disciplines within civil itself, right? So many different ones within that. And even sometimes those outside of civil that are still using DWG files, how do we organize all of our details so that someone can truly find it within just a normal sort of file structure that you would find on a network? As other speakers have already mentioned, that's incredibly difficult to do, and that's what AVAIL is so wonderful at, right? You can just do some searches and then you find all of those tools. So being able to do that and then be able to locate things in here directly, we can't I can't wait to use it more for this sort of thing. So we've started putting in these for blocks, other thing that would normally be on our legend. So we've got just sort of like the overall legend and then the individual blocks within here. We've even got one flagged, like being able to bring these in here. We were able to see then from the preview, oh, we used the wrong font, right? It's supposed to be this sort of font, and it's not. So I've got it flagged that I need to follow up on it because I just noticed it yesterday when I brought these in here. So, I wasn't expecting, AVAIL to be able to provide, QA, QC for me on my block library, but there it is. So nice to be able to have that in here as well. And then beyond things within the DWG format, we've just started also playing with some things within Bluebeam, which we use a lot as well. So we've got some channels up here. We're just starting to put these in here for our different profiles. So we have the different profiles already available to be able to install just from the network. But by putting them in here, we can have a little bit more information about it, because the name doesn't always tell you which profile to use for which thing. So here we're able to, with the description then that we can put in for the thumbnail, then all of a sudden it's a little bit clearer as to which one it is that you should double click on to be able to load in, and away you go. Haven't done that one yet. So that's what it is by default. And then same thing essentially for tool sets. We've got some of these going in here now. So it's visually, it's just nice to be able to see like what tools am I going to get to be able to bring in, as opposed to just having to go off of that file name to be able to locate it otherwise. Plus, obviously, you've got the text in there as well. So if you're searching for an individual tool, it should be able to help you locate it from that as well. So that's really sort of how we've been starting to use it. Now that I'm seeing some of the other things that other people have been using it for, I've got all sorts of additional ideas now running through my head of some additional things that we might try to do to sort of expand this out, because I think there's a lot more that this can do beyond just the couple of things that we're using it for right now. Beyond Revit, beyond Civil, beyond Review, to truly make it so that it's a much easier thing for our users, because you're always trying to use so many different platforms at once in order to get that final design out the door. Let's make it as easy as possible for our users to get that one single source of truth to find whatever that is right away. So that's what I had to share.
Great. Thank you, Rebecca. Yeah, that's awesome. The tool set looks really, really sharp. I think, was it Morgan and Elliot? Did you all do a little bit of that as well on bringing that into Avail? I think that was some kind of cool, kind of outside the box thinking on kind of bringing those tool sets into like a visual space here. That's great. All right, cool. So we're going to turn it over and answer some questions. One thing that I had just for the group, and maybe less about Rebecca, or maybe you can answer this as well, but I think talking about this as the work to be done, right? So I think it'd be great to have your perspective on like what was the process and strategy around prioritizing some of this content, getting it into Avail? What were the kind of order of operations that you all decided? That made it, maybe not seamless process, but easiest to manage process. And I'll kind of give it over to Elliot Morgan for JLG, and then yeah, Peter, you can provide your insights at SCB, and Rebecca, you might have some information on that as well. But yeah, order of operations, how do you prioritize some of this content getting into Avail, and some of that work to be done? What's the best way to kind of organize that when someone is maybe just now thinking about all these different ways that they can add content to Avail? What's your kind of takeaway on your all strategy?
I guess I'll kick us off. The way that and I'll answer your question from earlier. Yes, we did also start to build out a Bluebeam content library, and we have found a lot of success in that. And yes, especially with tool sets and having the visual preview of what's actually in those tool sets, because nobody knows otherwise. It's just a non-descriptive name. But I'll build off of that Bluebeam thread. Bluebeam was probably one of the first aha moments that I had when like, oh, we could store all of these assets in Avail. And that came directly from all of the questions that we would get all of the time. That would be like, where do I find this profile? Or where do I get this tool set? Or where's our stamp? Or where's all of this stuff? And so that is really how I prioritize that initial effort, is because I had a need. The need was to make my work, my daily life easier. And by getting it organized and up on Avail, made my life easier, because I was able to do that. Now, part of the challenge that came with all this Bluebeam content is, how do I work to automate some of that? Because you saw we used a lot of custom thumbnails, and I didn't go and create each one of those automatically. Like, I was able to come up with a system that is at least able to help automate the majority of that. So that was another like high priority item, is because how do I develop a system that lets me reproduce this for other assets down the line as they become priorities? Morgan, do you got anything?
Think that covers it pretty well, Elliot. I mean, obviously we were transitioning from, or I shouldn't say obviously, but we were looking for a replacement of Unify and Content Catalog. So Revit was a priority to begin with, and to Avail's strength there. But we, as a team, definitely saw that it offered so much more. And then as we messed with it, toyed around with it a little bit, experimented, having those aha moments, as Elliot said, when it's like, whoa, this can be, get people not having to go to our quote unquote resource drive on the network. And it's just like, this is that drive. I mean, it mirrors it exactly, but it's searchable and it can house everything. So yeah, just, I guess, listening to, your coworkers, what's a priority to them, but yeah, you can be overwhelmed. So
Yeah. Excellent. Peter?
Yeah, so in terms of the Bluebeam tool sets, we actually integrate everything into Bluebeam through a deployment, and we just push everything out to the user's system. So, but that's a good idea, that having additional tool sets up inside of Avail that they could just double click and run the DTX file. That's actually pretty clever. So you have to look into that. So, but that being the case, though, it turns out even though Frank had a really good approach on the network with a really good structure for his Revit details and even his CAD details at the time, and Avail was a great transition because it could just pick up that structure and then present it in a meaningful way that was a better searchable way and a quicker way to see it, because otherwise you're relying on waiting for any kind of imagery to load through Windows File Explorer, which can be kind of burdensome depending on the content in that folder. So that saved him a lot of headache and a lot of extra work actually promoting the content that's there. In my world for visualization, different story, because there really wasn't anything available at the time. So everything was all kind of, you grabbed it as you needed it. You checked online, you downloaded a file, you looked online somewhere else, and then you pulled it into your work, and then off you went. So we kind of looked at that to say, okay, what does the staff need? And we started with the entourage, and that was pretty straightforward. So we started curating entourage, gathering it, utilizing it, and then making that library accessible to users. We followed that up shortly with 3ds Max libraries, which also now evolved into the FBX libraries. Almost every manufacturer has FBX files. So we can utilize FBX and actually pull those together. So as we have vendors that have different types of models be utilized in our interior projects, we can start correlating all that into our content. Then also textures, materials, and so forth, and then moving into photography for marketing. So it really kind of depends. Everyone feels that their needs are all important, but sometimes it's kind of hard to juggle everything. But we have a really good idea of what the firm needs now, but there's definitely a lot more opportunity going into 26 that we can pick up some more ideas, especially with different types of internal functions and linking and so forth that we could utilize in different data sets. So, but that's kind of where we're going in that direction. But it's kind of an evolution. It's kind of based off of what kind of housekeeping needs to be done and what can we make life a little easier for the staff.
Okay, great. Yeah, thank you. And then Rebecca, did you have any, I mean, you kind of talked about it a little bit, I think, as you presented, but talking about that strategy or kind of order of operations on how you're thinking about it, kind of just getting started too on that kind of first take.
I mean, we had our aviation group was really eager to have a more standardized details folder already. So it sort of just it was great timing to be able to sort of have those things marry up. There's a couple other groups that are interested next, so those will probably be our next priority, just simply because that's what we have available, to be able to use for content there. But the more I play with it, the more opportunities that I see for being able to expand it with some of the other content that we already have that I know is good, that I'm not have to go back and update again, 2 months from now. So just going to be trying to put in as much that I already know that we have, and hopefully as soon as we're able to get more users using the platform, that'll spark more ideas and growth from there.
Yeah. Okay, great. Yeah, thank you all for that that type of insight. It's always kind of great to understand the starting point, especially when there's so much that can be done, so much potential. All right, cool. So I'm going to
And
switch over.
Clay, if I may for a second, I'd like
Oh
to
yeah,
just yeah, tap on to Peter's, with all of the material stuff like that. And I think I have another aha moment that Elliot or whatever that we had was with our material library too, and Avail's ability to do that related content. And Peter, you talked about like
yes,
textures, so Elliot, correct me if I'm wrong on some of the nomenclature here, but relief map, bumps maps, and all that,
Okay.
and people can find all that kind of stuff. So just that organic flow of what got prioritized and connecting all those things together. So
Yeah, to that point there is that the way I approach that is I didn't want the users to look up, say, marble one, right? And then find the diffuse, the normal, the bump, the height map, the metal, whatever, metal map, whatever variation for the PBR that you're looking for. So what I typically do for texture maps is I basically take all the maps relative to that map itself or that material, and I put that into a zip file, a zip archive. And then I have basically a JPEG or a PNG that's representative of that material. The nice thing that Avail does is that if you name a object or an asset inside of Avail, call it object X. If you have a JPEG or PNG called object X, it'll actually use that image as a thumbnail automatically for that zip file, which is really nice. So you actually have, in a sense, custom made, icons or material representation of your assets. So that makes it easy so that the user doesn't have to like, okay, now I need to look for a bump map or I have to look for something else. They can just double click on that archive, open it up, and they can just grab the ones that they want, drag it to their project folder, and then move on. And then the substance materials are self-encapsulating. So you just basically just grab that and go and link that into Twinmotion or wherever you're going to use it, and then off to the races. So I try to keep it simple. But the related material is actually interesting because you could go ahead and make some relationships between specific material types. That you brought up a good point because you could pick a particular type of brick and then see all the rest of the running bond bricks, or maybe you have a different type of, let's say, terrazzo, and different terrazzos that are the same family or stylization could be related to that. So that's a good point. So that comes down to time. So
right.
which is something
Yeah,
we wish we
yeah.
had all more of. But if we can have AI do that for us,
Right.
okay, now we're
Yeah.
talking. Okay, claims. not to give you an idea, but
No, for sure.
image relationship check. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah.
Maybe, I don't know.
It's something
All
that
right.
for research. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, great. So yeah, I'll switch it over. I'm going to read through a couple of questions. Some of them are specific for specific panelists, and other ones are kind of for the group. So the first one from Tom Kemp for JLG. Does JLG also have an intranet? Are there documents or information that is documented in both places? So you maybe have an intranet and Avail. Is there, duplication between those two things or overlap at all, or how's that set up for you all?
Yeah, I can speak to that about our sustainability library that I showed you in Avail. So that is actually also on our SharePoint intranet right now, but they're not duplication of efforts, right? They're being synced daily from SharePoint down to our Avail server, our local drive, so that the changes made and maintained by our sustainability specialists get uploaded to SharePoint, and that trickles down to our Avail folder, and then we use Stream to update that content as soon as there's an update. So we wanted to avoid duplication of resources. Obviously, that's a bad idea because someone always forgets to update a resource in one location versus another. So that's a solution we've taken in that case.
Yeah, I can chime in there on what we typically
Yeah.
do is that we do keep a separate divergence between the two elements. We have an intranet. It's we actually use K synthesis. I'm the admin of that. We've referred to it as the Nexus. And we put all of our documentation, procedures, how-tos, all of our instructional data sets are all related to the knowledge that's on the Nexus. That being the case, we do link from the Nexus with the linking ability that Avail has, where you can dial into that catalog or that section with a link. So we do reference material on the AVAIL platform via links. So we do as much documentation and informational data inside of our Nexus, but we treat AVAIL as a visual library or a visual catalog. And that's kind of like the divergence on how we see AVAIL, how we utilize AVAIL, and how it complements the content on the Nexus for us.
Excellent. Yeah, thank you all for that, for those responses. All right, moving on. So Helen Garina had a couple of questions, one for Peter, one for Rebecca. For Peter, are you storing resources, materials, etc., on BIM 360 or network drives?
Network drives. So we have a centralized network location that's internal to the firm. So that's the home, and that's basically the on-prem location of that. We're not putting anything in the cloud.
Okay. And then the question for Rebecca may or may not be relevant. So Helen had another question around using related content when you're harvesting sheets and details. So that's actually something that's not currently included in the AutoCAD and Civil 3D harvest functionality. There are some different components and different settings that you can enable on those blocks as you're harvesting, but it's not the same as a Revit. Harvesting a sheet, you can set up and enable related content, and so that those details and legends and schedules would appear as related content on the sheet. It's a little bit different for AutoCAD and Civil 3D. That's not synced into that specific harvest functionality, compared to the Revit. All right, Marcus, I saw that your hand was up. You had several questions in the chat, but I'm not sure if you are still with us through, so we'll kind of maybe skip over a couple of those. Helen had another question for everyone. Do you use AVAIL Cloud? Peter, you just kind of answered that, or publish your content directly from the network drive, SharePoint, other cloud solution? I think, Elliot, you kind of mentioned that as well on using SharePoint to some degree.
Yeah, we're set up the same way.
Yeah, we're on-prem for all our data is on-prem and our main data server. So everyone has direct access to it internally.
Yeah, sorry. So yeah, that's it for the questions. So thank you again. I'm going to wrap up, make some additional comments and announcements and things like that. But so if there are any other questions, feel free to post those as we kind of hang out just for a few more minutes. But let me switch over to kind of what's next. So switch my screen. All right, so I can't thank you enough for your feedback and your perspective and your stories around how you're organizing this. Your strategies around it does take a lot of work, so hats off to you all on kind of getting this far and then continue kind of brainstorm and strategize. Will Rouse is our director. If you have questions, features, things that we talked about today, some of these strategies around Revit or non-Revit content, feel free to reach out to Will. You can set up a meeting and start to kind of review that and start those discussions and consultations with him. If you are a current customer and you want to discuss strategies, right, and talk a little bit maybe about some of these examples today, and you're wanting to kind of get off the ground and maybe start to kind of implement some of these things, maybe you're not using Stream, which seems to be a very important tool in a lot of these workflows, especially from Peter and Elliot and Morgan's perspective. Let us know. We can answer your questions around Stream, getting it enabled, those kind of things. Myself, reach out to me, or again, Rob Snyder, kind of my counterpart in customer success. And then kind of looking ahead, we're very close. Rekha touched on it. AutoCAD and Civil 3D, that add-in is it's still in preview. So if you are interested in utilizing that, maybe you don't have access to that preview, let us know. Reach out to myself or Rob. We can get you access to that preview release. We're very close to launching in into production of that add-in and some of the different components and features that have been included there on November 19th at 2 o'clock. So just here in a couple of weeks, that will be in production, and we'll be able to kind of host an onboarding session to kind of go through a little bit of what Rebecca shared today and then answer your questions as well. Awesome. So thank you again for the panelists. Thank you for everyone who attended today, and we'll see you all next time. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.